You can keep your... Thank you, Sebastian. You can keep your questions coming in the chat, but at the end of the session, we'll also leave enough room for you to clear your questions. And I'm just checking admitting everybody into the room. We'll be starting very soon, so please adapt your name accordingly.
And welcome to the newcomer to session 3 of Employee Ownership Online Conference Series. Giovanna, I think we're good to start.
Yes, all right, let's go. So this is session 3, and we are your hosts. Very happy to have you all with us. I'm Giovanna, I'm Events and Community Manager at B Lab. And next to me, I have Sebastian, our Director for B Corp certifications, SMEs, and Community and Educational Programs Director. Today with us, we have Delphine Gotche, attorney at law and founder of Purpose Lawyers, guiding us through the realms of foundation ownership. And with us, we also have Michel Jacquard, founder and partner of Idest Avocat. Sorry for my poor French pronunciation. And he will also be sharing his insights on steward ownership and more about employee ownership. So we have two very experienced experts with us. And in the agenda for today, we will be starting with, as already given away, an introduction to foundation ownership. So this is session 3, and we came a long way since our first session on the first little concepts of employee ownership, and we started diving deeper and deeper. So we covered employee ownership, we covered steward ownership already in the second session. We'll dive deeper today, and we're very happy to go to close this online conference series with foundation ownership, going a step forward. But we'll also go a little bit back and recap steward ownership concepts, the best practices and challenges that have been a hot topic amongst our audience, asking always the challenges and the counter parts of something that looks so amazing. And then we'll finish with the Q&A and open floor. We also have a representative of Loico with us that will continue sharing Loico's experience with employee ownership. But before that, let's get to know you and let's get a sense of your knowledge on foundation ownership. Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Giovanna, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have this audience watching live or joining with the recording. We ask you to please log into this Mentimeter, so you can either take your phone and flash the QR code, or you can also go to www.menti.com and enter the code 84834010, and we will have 2 questions for you to get started on the session. The question, as you will see, is our aim to get a sense of the knowledge of the audience, the needs of the audience, and to help as well with the future discussion that we will have today. So I am going to now share my screen that you should see with, again, this code. I see there's already 4 people coming, 5 people. People are joining in very fast. Again, you can either flash the code with your phone or go to www.menti.com and enter the code that's appearing right here. We have 6 people. Let's wait for a couple more. And then we'll be able to start to keep a good pace with the timing. And the first question that we have for the audience is the following, namely, what words, what concept, what idea come to your mind when you think about the concept of foundation ownership? Is it what comes to your mind 3 interrogation mark? Is it a very promising model for my company? Is it something else? Would love to hear your thoughts as to what comes to your mind when you think about the concept of foundation ownership. So we see transmission, long-term opacity, alignment. Haven't heard about it. So welcome to know more about it. If we receive a couple more answer, I think that will help even more our expert make sure that the program and the knowledge they have prepared to share with you will be as impactful as possible, honest, reliable. I think that's terminologies that will please you, Delphine, to know this perception that is perceived as something honest for the long term, quite aligned with what you shared in preparation of the meeting. And based on that knowledge, the question we have, the last one for this Mentimeter is, what is most important for you as an audience to learn on foundation ownership or steward ownership models? So you came here because you're interested. Normally, what would you like to go away with? What knowledge, what practical knowledge? How to get your company future-proof, how to do it. So really concretely, and I guess to know how to do it concretely, it's okay, let's learn what this is about. And if we get a couple more answers, giving you the time to write it down, we'll have all the information that we need and that our expert need to move forward with the presentations themselves. We see differences between the different models, differences, costs. Is there any country differences? We may have companies representative from various countries in Europe or across the world. And maybe we should wait for one last entry before moving on with the presentations. Here we are, how to develop the roadmap to implement it. Great. Well, we have taken good note of the most important element for you, and I'm sure our expert panelists have as well. And so moving on, I'd like now to pass on back the mic to you, Giovanna, for our first speaker. Thank you very much for participating.
And let me go back to my slides. There we go. Well, then I would actually already pass the mic. Would like to pass the mic to Delphine for an introduction to foundation ownership. So Delphine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giovanna. First of all, let me maybe introduce myself. I'm a lawyer based in Geneva, and I'm also a member of the Center for Philanthropy here at the University of Geneva, and I'm working with several entrepreneurs who chose to give some part of their companies to foundation, or even the total shares of their company. I'm also working with foundation owning companies, shall it be in Switzerland or in Europe. So I saw your interest in knowing all the differences between the models, the different models in Europe or worldwide. We should maybe spend a week together, but unfortunately we'll have only 20 minutes to talk about the subject, so I'll try to be as fast as possible and as precise as possible. We can go to next slide. Yes, thank you. Lucas, last week, talking about steward ownership, told you about Robert Bosch and what he wanted for his company. And we can go to next slide. So he told you also about the way he structured it using foundation-owned company model. And that's what we're going to talk today. And we can go to next slide. As Bosch, so many companies around the world are foundation-owned, and I'm sure you know most of them. Shall it be in Denmark, like Carlsberg, Lego, Novo Nordisk, also in the US with Patagonia, in Germany, Zeiss, Bosch, but also so many in Switzerland, as we're going to see today, like Rolex, of course, Victorinox, Lindt and Sprüngli, even some football club, like the Servette FC football club, but we'll go through all those examples. So when we're talking about foundation ownership, what are we talking about? Some of you said they haven't heard about this model. Well, this model has been existing for decades, even since the 19th century in Europe. And this model allows long-term economic performance for the company while contributing substantially to the general interest through the activities of the foundation, which will be the only shareholder of the company or one shareholder among several others like family members, investors, or even other foundations or holding companies, as we saw, for example, with the Bosch model. We can go to the next slide. So in Denmark, we can see more than 1,300 foundation holding companies. The foundation-owned companies in Denmark represent more than the 2/3 of the listed value in Copenhagen, and they will find the foundation owning them or financing more than 60% of the Danish research. You see 2.5 billion euros. It's the total amount of the donation operated by holding foundation in Denmark in 21. In Sweden, we can find around 1,000 of foundation-owned companies. In Germany, around 500, like Bosch, for example. Of course, you all know about Patagonia in the USA. And I was interested to know their reality in Switzerland. So we'll see next slide. You know that there are so many foundations in Switzerland, around 14,000 foundations in Switzerland, but we have no idea on how many of them are holding companies. What we know is that there are several of them, among them the biggest one in Switzerland. So I was very interested in doing a research on them, and I decided to take a panel of more than 100 foundations holding more than 2,000 companies in Switzerland and worldwide. You can find also the English version of my book directly on the website of the University of Geneva, shall you be interested to deep into the subject. So what is their reality, I'll say? First of all, considering the foundations, they could have different purpose, and we will see it later on. But the foundations which have a general interest purpose are really active on all the topics and subjects, as you can see. Considering the companies, they are active really in all the sectors, and you can find companies of all sizes. Shall they be startups, which is quite hard, but I think that Michel will see this during his presentation. You can find also listed companies, SMEs, so really all types of companies, depending really on the intention of its founder, as we're going to see. You can go to next slide. I told you that holding foundation in Switzerland can have different purposes. And be aware that purpose shall not be confused with the activity of the foundation. So first of all, the foundation can have a public utility purpose. And I gave you an example. Sorry, it's a French example, as we don't have official document in English here. Well, not truly. But you see in this case, the foundation has really a philanthropic purpose and will be, or has the possibility to be tax exempted with this. In case of a foundation with a public utility purpose, the fact that the foundation is holding the company is not its real purpose, it's a mean to the purpose. But a holding foundation can also have a real economic purpose. And in this case, and we will see it with the Victorinox example, the purpose of the company will really be to hold the company in a long-term perspective. We can go to the next slide. And there are also quite new examples of those economic purpose. If you see here, you have a picture of the Chaves family, who used to own the PX group here in Switzerland, and they just decided last year to give some shares to a foundation they set up in order to contribute to the sustainability and responsible development of the company. We go to next slide. Let me maybe give you an example. You all know about the Swiss knife, don't you? So I told you about Victorinox and the history of Karl Elsener, his founder. So I will bring you back with me to the 19th century when Karl Elsener decided to establish Victorinox. And as you will understand, he was founding a knife making workshop in Schwyz, and he really intended to create jobs at that time, especially when the work perspective here in Switzerland were terrible, and we are really in a different mindset. So he also established an association with other knife making workshops to be able to provide the first large delivery of knives to the Swiss Army and create the famous Swiss Army knife that we all know. And the company has stayed in family hands for over 4 generations. And in 2000, the 4th generation member were 11 children. The 5th generation member were 24 descendants of the founder. So they all decided to solidify their family governance and to structure Victorinox as a double foundation-owned company with a philosophy to ensure the survival and the prosperity of the company on the long term. So they decided to set up 2 foundations, as you can see on the slide. The first one, we can go back to the...
Sorry.
Don't worry, Giovanna.
But
so
now...
we were talking about Victorinox. Yes, thank you. So you can see Victorinox Stiftung, and this foundation has an economic purpose. Its purpose is to lastingly sustain Victorinox as an independent company while conserving the company's initial social purpose. And they set up also a second foundation, the Karl und Elise Elsener Gut Stiftung. And the purpose of this foundation is of general interest. And this foundation supports non-profit and charitable activities. And you see, the Victorinox Stiftung holds 90% of the shares of the company, and the Karl und Elise Elsener Gut Stiftung holds 10% of the company shares. What you have to know is that the Victorinox Stiftung has decided or decides every year not to take its dividends. So the dividends stay within Victorinox, and it enables really Victorinox to go through crises and to sustain really its longevity. Now we can go to the next slide. So the question could be, what are the incentives to adopt this model? As we are used to saying, foundation ownership is long-term ownership by essence, meaning you can really adopt this model to ensure the continuation of the company or the continuation of the vision of the founder of the company. And during our studies, we also got that the companies that are foundation-owned have an higher survival rate during the time, and also they are more stable in time of crisis. I was talking about Victorinox. Let me tell you that, as you understood, Victorinox Stiftung reinvests its dividends into the company. And in 2001, you all remember the September 11 attacks, which led to the interdiction of having knives within plane. Of course, that was a huge crisis for Victorinox. And really, they were allowed to go through this crisis, keeping all their employees, as an example. We also saw that the companies that our foundation own usually have a bigger R&D budget, which increase innovation and creativity also. I already told about the independence of the company, of course, as the foundation has no shareholder by itself. May I say that the foundation is its own owners, I'll say. So, of course, this could be very interesting in terms of independence of the company the foundation will own as a shareholder. Of course, it will also preserve the local implementation of the companies the foundation is owning. And we see also, and this could be very interesting on an employee perspective, that there are higher wages and higher employee retention within the companies that our foundation own. We can also see that the employees are usually more motivated within foundation-owned companies, as maybe it rehearses their feeling of being a part of a social movement with a real societal meaning and purpose. Then we can go through the slide. Thank you. You see that those, oh no, if you can revert, Giovanna, sorry, they were quite difficult. That's perfect. You can remain like this. So all the effects I gave you were based on the company, but of course, the fact for a foundation to be the shareholder of a company increase also its activity. I mean, the amount the foundation can spend to fulfill its purpose. And you see also a real approach to business succession with foundation ownership. Just to be clear, when you are thinking on business succession and you are thinking on long term, you are thinking also on what you want to give to your children. Do you want to give them assets, or do you want to transmit them the values of your family? Then you could be interested also in adopting a foundation owned company model, I'll say. Then there are different points to address when I'm talking about foundation ownership. You may have a question, for example, I'm already a B Corp, so how does it work? I mean, are we addressing the same issues or not? And we all know it's a huge involvement to get the certification for B Corp. I mean, you're really doing a great engagement doing this. But when we are talking about foundation ownership, we are really talking about the nature and the quality of the ownership. And working on that level allows you to embed on a more longer perspective your engagement. And I always talk about Cyril Vieux, which is a founder of Seabird, not in Switzerland, but in France. And he said, a company with a mission is one step, but shareholding is the ultimate step. You align the interest of your shareholder with those of your mission-driven company. You create a sustainable ecosystem. And we can go to the next step. Whoops. So you see, what imports the most is your intention. And you can then work on different perspectives. You can, of course, work on the management, on the governance, and on the nature and the quality of the shareholding. But someone asked us at the beginning of the session, what could be a roadmap? I would say the first step is really to think and really express what is your own personal, real intention behind the wall. And then we could help you with the materialization of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delphine. We will be leaving the questions to the end. I see some questions coming in the chat and we'll get back to them. But maybe Michelle will also answer or actually create more questions in your head, which is also always showing interest and curiosity. So I'm going to jump straight to Michelle Jacquard, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual stage. And in about 15 to 18 minutes, we go back to your questions. So please write them down and keep them in mind, because in 15 minutes, we'll address them. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Delphine. Thank you, everyone. I realize that I really look younger in this picture than so. The truth is what you see on the screen, not the slide. That's the real life, right? So just get rid of this young picture, please, Giovanna. That's not the truth. And there's something else. You know, I use pink in the presentation, because pink is great and everything is pinky. But I think the purpose of the next 10 minutes just to show you that foundation ownership, steward ownership, employee ownership might still not be as rosy as it might be perceived. And basically to try and go into the details of trying to implement that kind of structures. So that's the challenge I'll pick up in the next slide. So, and it's a little bit, of course, provocative. That's to provoke a discussion. We're all convinced here that this is the way to go. So, Giovanna, please go to the next slide. So, just a kind of refresh. You've all been told, and we know now that steward ownership, the framework, and basically steward ownership, is very easy to understand. You've got key principles, self-governance, and profit serves purpose. And it's also easy, and this is the recipe to just achieve that. It's easy. It's in a world where binaries, you just split between the voting rights and the economic rights, and you just give voting rights to stewards. And those guys take care of the company and the purpose. And because this is the real world, nevertheless, to provide, investors with some financial return, well, no voting rights, but you give them some dividends and economic rights. So it's very simple on the paper. Actually, not so fast. Huh? There are several models for distinct scenarios, and there are issues and really tough questions to try and answer to the best of your knowledge regarding the design, the structuring, but also the implementation. So that's what we're going to try and cover in the next minutes. I realize that the colors are awful, so sorry for that. I should have asked ChatGPT to do the trick for me. So, that's a very traditional model where basically you split between voting rights and economic rights. So I do a lot of impact investing, startup financing, that kind of stuff. So basically we're talking usually about, early stage companies. Those companies want to change the world. They want to have a very significant impact. They've got the will, they've got the commitment, they've got the sweat, they've got the brains, they don't got the money. So basically they need to get some support from presumably very dumb but rich investors, but you don't want to give away more than what is required to those investors. So you need to find a balance. So basically, you've got the founders, and the founders own a majority of the voting rights. It's still their baby, it's their company. And you need to give the investors put the money in, so you need to give them some protection regarding how the money is going to be spent, right? But limited rights and governance. Now, with regards to economic rights, well, you grant those investors actually the whole bunch of the proceeds. At least, if the company is a success, then they get their money back, and then maybe they participate pro rata to another distribution. The point is, they took a higher risk, they get the money first, and you as founders, basically, you get last. And you deal with that in a shareholders agreement that addresses share transfers, purchase option, exit provisions. So this is a typical private company shareholding in Switzerland. no ownership or steward ownership or employee ownership or foundation ownership. Okay, so let's start adding complexity. So there you go. First step, you think that it's a good idea to try and align the interest of employees with the purpose, the mission. You can't pay those guys market salary too, so you're going to tell them you're going to join the company, be part of the venture, be part of the story. We are going to give you certain voting rights. As founders, you still own a majority, but basically you slowly over time agreed through an ESOP or an incentive plan to grant employees part of the company up to 20% maybe. And with those employees, you have also covered all the issues covered through a different shareholders agreement, certain rules. They have formally voting powers, they hold voting shares, but those voting rights are neutralized through a shareholders agreement because it's still the founders calling the shots with the investors. You might also increase this employee ownership flavor in your company by making sure that in terms of the way you are organized, the company culture and the internal regulations, basically you give those employees a voice to the table, a place to the table, and some real leverage on the conduct of the business. But this is layer one, okay? So you just distracted part of the ownership to employees, and those employees are more aligned as shareholders than other shareholders because they work with the company. So this is already a kind of a lights, basically, if you want steward ownership. Let's go further. So going further means foundation ownership, and of course I think we would agree with the Delphine that it's not linear like that. You have so many different models, but foundation ownership is on the one hand simpler to grasp and understand and maybe to implement depending on the circumstances. But for me at least, this is a step further. We're not talking about employees, we're really talking about anchoring the mission with a long-term vehicle, which is a foundation. The foundation will protect the mission. The foundation, you can't just take over a foundation. We're not talking about shareholders being, who can be bought. We're talking about really people thinking of a long-term mission and making sure that they have the means to achieve that objective. So basically, usually what happens that at some point, I think definitely this is the example that you took, that at some point succession or whatsoever, second generation, you think, well, it might be good to try and think about transferring our founder shares to a foundation. And the foundation will exercise basically its voting rights and also use the dividends as per its purpose. So you've got a very anchored shareholding. You might still have the investors on the side, you might still have the employees. One step further. Dual foundation or triple or whatever. So, the employees might also think it's a good idea to, or it might be a good idea to pool the shares that are reserved basically or allocated to the employees to a trust or to a foundation that might provide liquidity to the employees, meaning that basically you've got some private bank that may purchase back from employees some shares and give them basically some cash in return. Even if the foundation does not want, and precisely that's the purpose, sell the company, because those poor employees, they have voting rights they can't exercise, they have actually no leverage. Oh, they feel that they are empowered because they have a part of the company, but there is no liquidity event. And at the end of the day, you want to provide those employees with some cash. So the foundation may buy back the shares of the employees, give them back, or maybe you have a separate foundation on the side, okay? That's complicated things further. Okay, now here you've got the appearance of a golden share. So that would be, if you talk to the purists, that would be pure steward ownership. So more complicated than any other mechanism, but usually it's supposed to cover all angles. So here, basically, the idea is that you're not talking about founders, employees, investors anymore. This is the past. So basically, your shareholders or the owners of the company are allocated between stewards, and the stewards act as curators and promoters of the mission and the purpose. And because they are so close to the mission and the purpose, they need to actively contribute to the company. So usually those are operational shareholders, might also be former founders. But you don't talk about founders, employees anymore. So those are the guys operative and linked to the and actively promoting the mission. But basically, because those stewards can change the rules that they set up themselves, you still want some superpower to basically prevent them from even thinking about changing the rules. And that's the golden shareholder, okay? So it might also be a foundation, huh? I put here a golden shareholder, but it's just someone or an entity being the gatekeeper and make sure that the mission is preserved, whatever happens, with just one share in the company. And everyone else is here for the money. Let's face it, huh? At some point, you need to provide the investors with some return. Employees want some cash, and even founders. So yeah, it's great. You know, I love this concept of, you know, profit serves purpose. I love this profit of self-governance. But at some point, I need also to find my return. So everyone else is there for the money. So we'll call them financial shareholders. So this is a more complicated, if you want, structure. But how do we deal with that? At the very end, and then we'll go very specifically into the details, at the very end, you should get rid of all those financial shareholders, because the founders got what they wanted, you know, after they have been paid dividends for a few years, it's fine. The investors got their money back with a multiple of 3 or 4 times, so you can get rid of them. And you have this wonderful steward ownership system where you have the stewards owning everything. And there are no profit distribution except for the purpose. And you still have the golden shareholder making sure that everything is still in line. Okay, so you know, several layers of complexity that, of course, you have hybrid solutions or whatsoever. Now, what are the questions that you need to ask yourself? And what are the hurdles? You know, in this implementation journey of all this, usually there are, you know, tons of questions that need to be answered, and the answer might, you know, change over time. But what I've realized is that, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, mission purpose in general terms. But if you really want to set up a proper and credible steward ownership or foundation ownership mechanism, you need to spend a whole lot of time defining the purpose, the mission, to make sure that everyone, the stewards, the golden shareholder, the foundation, the employees understand what this is about. So it's not about saving the world, having a big impact. Not even Sebastian and Giovanna, this you know, language that you add as B Corp certification, part of the B Corp certification process, which is to have a significant positive impact. That's not, I would say, even sufficient to properly go down the way into a steward ownership. You need to be more specific. But you also need to be more specific, because guess what? The lawyers have not done the right thing, and the courts have not clarified the field. You know, frankly, under Swiss law, we have a wonderful purpose. If you look at what is the purpose of the board, if you want, in our Swiss Code of Obligations, is to act in the best interests of the company. So that's great. So, you know, this is a wonderful sentence. The board is supposed to act in the best interest of the company, which basically is really close to the steward ownership philosophy. Not in the best interest of the shareholders, but in the best interest of the company. Now, everybody disagrees as to actually what the best interest of the company should be. So it's also extremely useful to think about the mission and the purpose, and to be specific in the articles of association, because that will, you know, basically act as a North Star, as a compass for the board. So just in this slide, you know, lack of proper mission definition and lack of proper mention in the articles of association, because of that piece of the puzzle which is missing, you have a lot of steward ownership processes that are aborted and are not going and completed. Okay, what are the other issues? Stewards. So great, you know, steward is at the very center of this stuff. Steward ownership. Please define steward. Okay, so you've got shareholders, right? Shareholders, you know, the stewards have voting powers. So those are shareholders. How are you going to basically decide who should be considered stewards and have this role and responsibility of promoting the mission? So what we see in the market is, you know, employees with more than X years of seniority. So it's just, you know, over time, that's the legacy of the employee ownership stuff, if you want, just your shares should vest, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you've been there for 3 years, so you know how it goes. If you're still there, it means that you're aligned with the interest. But you need certainly something more, who make a significant and active contribution to the company. Okay, now the guy being the deal maker and bringing a lot of revenue for the company is certainly making a significant contribution to the company. But this guy is just, or this person, this girl, the head of the CEO is a woman. The CEO is doing, of course, contributing to the company significantly, but does not at all follow the values of the company. This person is disrespectful with the coworkers, is really too cynical to really dare and be aligned with the values and the purpose. So, should that person be a steward or not? So are you going to define the eligibility requirements with the financial performance or with the alignment with the purpose? That's a really interesting question. Then what about the old guys? The old guys having contributed for the company for 10 years. So then you're going to say, you're too old. You're not a steward anymore. That person is maybe the only person really understanding what's the mission and the purpose of the company is. And you're going to tell that person you don't qualify as a steward. Okay, so that also goes for the initial grant of now you're a steward, congratulations, to how can you keep your steward label and the shares that go with that. So over time, maybe the steward community will evolve. What about founders? Because the founders will say, the founders usually trigger the process. So of course the founders will say, I love steward ownership. So as a founder, of course I'm a steward. But I put sweat equity into that, so I don't want anyone else to get the money before me. So I want also to be considered as a financial investor. And there are conflicts of interest in the early stages of steward ownership morphing between founders, because those guys are stewards, but they also want to have a fair return on their investment. So they also get investor shares, right? So you need also to deal with that. Next slide.
Michel,
on
the next slide, I just jump in to raise your awareness that you have 2 minutes left until 40.
Wonderful, 120 seconds. There's a famous show on TV regarding that. So same questions regarding the financial investors. Okay, so you've got pure investors, and you agree that those guys should not be steward. But why would they trust the steward in the first place? Okay, because the stewards can change the rules. They decide who is a steward and who is no more a steward. So basically, that's the reason why basically they want to have this golden shareholder, which is the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is not conflicted, okay? The golden shareholder. So there I've put what I've perceived in the market as being, the usual caps. And also, basically as financial investor, you don't get anything before the 7th year of activity of the company, and before really purpose can or profits can be distracted from the purpose to make sure that the investors get something. Same thing about the founders. So next slides. Those are the questions that basically those are examples of questions that you will need to ask yourself. And golden shareholder also. So there are lots of questions that need to be asked to the golden shareholder, to the financial investors, and to the stewards. Next slide. So you end up in a situation where, very concretely, as lawyers, if you need to draft a shareholders agreement of a comprehensive steward ownership company, you will end up with steward shares, usually common shares, okay? You will end up with I shares, so for investors, no voting rights or limited voting rights, capital I. You will end up with F shares for the founders, and you will end up with a G share for a golden shareholder. So you have a company with 4 different distinct classes of shares. So you see, it's much more complicated than it could be. On the paper, by design, it's something that works very well, and it works. Don't get me wrong, but you need to really take it not as a marketing exercise, but as a true process that you need to go through. Last slide, I think the next one is the last slide. Yeah, useful resources. Here you've got a freely downloadable impact term sheet with a steward ownership module that reference to a template shareholders agreement that was developed with We Are Stewards, in the Netherlands, also trying to put in place a golden shareholder model. So you have here useful resources for free to basically get more familiar with the stuff. And lessons learned, last slide. Not only not one size fits all, but it's not for everyone. Don't take that steward ownership stuff easily and lightly. It's not for everyone. I think it's more difficult for early startups because of the timeline, the long term, and you need to have really everyone aligned. It might be easier for established companies at a point where basically there is a shift or a succession, as Delphine said, the founders, second generation, and so on. It needs to be triggered by the founders, and there's a delicate balance to strike at all times, because the model that you will develop at some point in life of the company might have to evolve at some point. That's it. 120 seconds, Sebastian. Did I do it?
You made miracle, Michel. Congratulations.
You did it.
That's it.
Wonderful.
Thank you
So
very
questions,
much.
guys. Shoot.
So before we jump into that,
Sorry.
there was
Sebastian.
a lot of
Sebastian.
There was text, there was a lot of information, and we will share the recording and the slides so you can go through them slowly at your own pace for everybody that's here in the call today. But yes, without further ado, questions, and I will pass the mic to Sebastian to moderate that.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to welcome another Sebastian Maison from Loico. Sebastian, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. You've been with Loico from very early in the life of the company. You've been very involved in the employee ownership model of Loico. We have a case study in the material that we will be sharing to our audience on Loico and your lesson learned. So you're here to represent the company. Before starting with the question to our panel that we prepared and taking a question from the audience, I would love to give you the mic, Delphine. I saw you were reacting a lot to what Michel was presenting. So I would love to give you the opportunity to maybe rebound on some of the elements that you heard.
No, I completely agree with Michel and all he said. First of all, there's not one model that fits all. And this is really so important. I mean, definitely. The second of all is definitely early stage could be tricky. And you really have to address some issues, especially linked to investors or shareholders agreement that could be quite dangerous with the path through foundation ownership or steward ownership. And I agree with all the keys you mentioned, Michel, and there's so many more, of course. That's why we're here, actually.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna make the audience benefit from your presence. Before asking the question we had prepared, I would like to open the floor for spontaneous question from the audience. Just raise your hand, ideally the digital hand via the Zoom function, so we can see your hand if you have any question. Otherwise, we'll take the question that were on the chat and the ones that we prepared. Then maybe as audience, you think about the question, I can take the one that Beatrice asked on the chat, namely, what are the tax status of these foundations acting as shareholder of an operative company? And I guess the question was during your presentation, Delphine.
Yeah.
Delphine, that you take this
well,
one.
It's a huge question. I don't know how many minutes I have to answer.
We have 9 minutes until the end of the presentation, and ideally we want to get a couple of questions from the audience.
Okay, so just to go very fast, it depends completely on the statutory purpose of the foundation. So the tax authorities will really examine any request for tax exemption, but clearly, just in order to answer shortly, I say if you have a general interest purpose, then you can apply to a tax exemption status, but you have several other points to check, even related to the governance. As an example, there could be just one person who will sit both at the board of the foundation and at the company owned by the foundation. And you have different, very specific points like this one. Of course, if the board, the purpose of the foundation is strictly economic, then you won't be eligible to any tax exemption.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure this provided helpful insight to Beatrice for her question. I'd like now to turn to you, Sebastian, at Loico. Loico has a very strong employee ownership model, that keeps being improved and iterated upon. The question for you would be, with what eyes and what mindset do you look at what has just been presenting this afternoon on foundation ownership specifically, steward ownership more broadly?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, and hi everyone. Just Loico is a 10 years company. So about foundation is something that we started to look 1 year ago, already thinking about what will happen when the first Loico founders and most of the shareholders will leave, to be sure that the Loico vision, Loico mission, Loico values, everything that has been said before is true, will be kept. And we've started to study that. We started honestly to discuss this with Delphine and think about what could be the good organization, with one holding or not, one foundation, two foundation, this kind of thing. Then for the moment in Loico, we think that it's something that will make sense in the future, but not yet. I say we're just a 10 years company. We are not a company here since 100 years with many money. So not something that we are going to do right now. But we think that it's the solution for us to be sure that Loico stay Loico when, I said, founders and most of the actual shareholders, which are Loico employees, will leave, and ensure that will never become something which is not Loico, with our strong ADN and so on.
So what you're saying is that the employee ownership model that you have now is a step, a milestone in the journey towards this further goal.
And maybe without explaining everything which is in the case study, but in Loico now everybody can become a shareholders. If you're here in Loico since 3 months, as with really a small amount of money, you can become a shareholders. And when we vote, every shareholders has one vote. So whatever the number of shares you have one vote. And to validate something, we need half of the shareholders and half of the shares. And with this, since the beginning, we think that whatever the number of shares you have, whatever the employee you are since a month or 10 years, you have the same vote, and you can be part of the strategy and the discussion. And this linked to our organization, which is without management, with a Loicocracy, which is an horizontal method. Really think that employee ownership today is in all green, I would say, or in a good situation, Loico. But what's happened when everybody leave in 10, 20 years, this year will come the foundation solution, I think.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. Any question from the audience that you'd like to open your mic and just bring it to our fantastic experts? But otherwise, we have a lot of them in stock.
There was one back in the beginning, Sebastian, from Lorenzo, regarding Victorinox again. So why one foundation could not do both commercial and donation? I guess this was covered already with the competing goals of each one of them, right? But maybe, Michelle, I think that's something that you also covered, the competing wishes.
Yes, there I am. Yes, so as somehow I said you need to think a lot at the very beginning about who should do what and how it's going to evolve over time. Now the starting point should be, what is the simplest way to achieve what I want to achieve? And I like what Sebastian just said. Not you, Sebastian, the other Sebastian. Meaning, it's really let's try and see, and maybe the solution right now is status quo, or maybe it's just incremental optimization on 1 or 2 internal processes. This is not a situation where you absolutely, if you start such a process, you need to end up with a new Patagonia structure. So yes, I see no reason why. I think the very specific question was just one foundation basically trying to align those interests and balance those interests. That's certainly possible, and that would be the simplest solution. Now, if we really want to make sure that not depend and rely on politics at the trustee level, you might want to de-risk and make sure that you can be more specific into one single purpose with one foundation and set another foundation next to it with a different purpose. Okay, but legally speaking, you may start with just one foundation. That would be already a very good improvement compared to a situation where we have a diverse base of shareholders, right? And Sebastian and Loico said, okay, we did our assessment right now. Maybe we're not ready, or maybe it's not the right time right now. So we'll do what we can, and maybe we will revisit in 2 years' time and do that. It's really a process. So hopefully I've answered the question.
Thank you very much, Michel, on that thematic, and that will be the last intervention already, unfortunately. Delphine, is there anything you'd like to share before we move on to the close of the session?
No, I think we really covered a part of the topic, and maybe one point, Michel, you mentioned also the difference between financial stock and voting stock, and it's maybe time just to talk about Patagonia, because we all knew about the Patagonia model. Yvon Chouinard last year decided, to give the share he held on the Patagonia company to two different structure. One is a trust who got all the voting stock, but almost no financial stock. And the other one is a non-profit, the Old Fast Collective, holding almost all the financial stock, like around 98%, but no voting rights. And that's an interesting model, which could difficultly be applying in Switzerland for several legal reasons. But it's maybe also a path we could go through.
Thank you.
That's why we love to say our B Corps are there for great inspiration, like Patagonia is, and Loico. And on that note, we want to thank you all for coming, for joining. I want to say, keep your eyes on your emails next week, because it will come. You'll receive the slide sessions from 1 to 3. You'll receive the recordings so that you can revisit and study them again. You'll receive the employee ownership guide we've been preparing for you with all of our amazing partners, the case study on Loico for inspiration again, and practical examples from Loico and also from other companies and documents that can serve as inspiration. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you, Delphine, Michel, and Sebastian for being here today. And I wish you all a very great afternoon and a good weekend ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.